Welcome, strangers, to Talkumentary, a show where we watch documentaries, then get together and talk about them. Along the river was a flower.
That is the wrong key. The wrong key.
She's got such a beautiful voice. I just
love
it when she sings. She sounds so
I love
great.
it so much, Jerry. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Jeff, and this is Talkumentary. Tonight, in the flea-infested Talkumentary den, along with the raccoons and cats, I am joined by this crazy crowd. Katy, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Jeff.
Molly, welcome back to the den.
Thank you, thank you.
And Bruce, the juice is loose. Brice, what's up? What up, man? We watched, if you couldn't tell, a very strange documentary called Grey Gardens. This is the oldest documentary that we've watched for our show thus far.
It's very difficult to keep the line between the past and the present.
Of course, I won't get out of here till she dies or I die.
Who is she?
And another thing, Mrs. Beale wasn't taken care of sexually.
I'll have to get drunk, Edie. I'll have to start drinking. I can't take it.
We might get into it, get into a little older documentaries maybe, but it was kind of fun to watch an older one.
Was it fun? Because I didn't get that from you.
No, I didn't like this documentary at all, but it was fun to watch an old doc.
Yeah, definitely.
This film follows Edith and Edith, Big Edie and Little Edie, a mother and daughter duo, ex-socialites who come from high-class families, yet now struggle with health and societal expectations from the inside of their dilapidated old mansion in East Hampton, New York, which they lovingly call Grey Gardens. Grey Gardens was nominated for some awards. Believe it or not, Brice, this thing was actually nominated for some awards.
It's tough to
Pretty name
believe.
for a house, but it's just
These
not a pretty
ladies
house.
are doing some great things.
Oh, yeah, so great. Good thing they don't have neighbors.
Yeah, the neighbors are far. Yeah.
Neighbors
they're far
can't
enough
see
away.
through those trees, you know.
Grey Gardens was nominated for a Gold Hugo Best Feature at the Chicago International Film Festival in 1976. It was nominated for Best Film at the 1975 Faro Island Film Festival. It won the Fipresci Prize in the Nobody Cares competition at the Faro Island Film Festival in 1975, which I tried looking that up and I found nothing about it except for this won it. So I don't know. It won in 2011 the Cinema Eye Legacy Award. So it got a legacy something or other. In 2014, Sight and Sound poll film critics voted Grey Gardens the 10th best documentary film of all time.
You're welcome. I know that's how you feel.
Yeah, I just don't get it. Entertainment Weekly ranks this doc as number 33 in the top cult films of all time.
That is a good category. Cult
Yeah,
films.
cult films. I would agree with that. Just like everything else in the world, it is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but has a 94% tomato meter with an audience score of 85% with over 5,000 ratings.
Wow.
94% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is surprising to me.
Surprising.
Surprising
Impressive.
is
Yeah.
God.
That's
Yeah.
how you really feel, Jeff.
Yeah.
You
This
can't
was.
say it wasn't interesting to watch, though.
I can tell you that my stomach was in a knot the entire time hearing them talk over each other for almost 2 hours.
Oh, yeah. I
It was
was
difficult.
like anxious the entire time.
Yeah.
I was like, when are they going to stop?
And when are they going to start telling us what this thing's about?
I know. I kept waiting for
What's
context.
wrong with the house?
Or
So
why they
dirty.
still live there?
It's so dirty.
Is someone coming to take care of Mother Darling? Because
Something
little
needs to
Edie's sure not doing a good job.
And why are they feeding the raccoons?
And
That
is this
was my
pate
number one
darling
question.
or is this the cat food?
And we will get into the answers to all of those questions because we clearly know a lot about this documentary based on the doc itself. This was directed by David and Albert Maisels, Ellen Hovde, and Muffy Meyer. Muffy's a fun name.
It's a fun name.
Muffy from
dog
Arthur.
name. Yeah.
That's what it makes me think.
Is that a thing? Produced by David and Albert Maisels and Susan Fromke. Narrated by absolutely nobody. The film was a Portrait Films production, distributed by
Does that
Portrait
bother you,
Films,
Jeff?
and we streamed this documentary on HBO Max.
Oh, HBO Max.
Where did you watch it, Bruce?
There.
All of that information will be linked in the show notes.
The show notes.
Let's get into it. Quick warning, if you haven't seen Grey Gardens, don't.
There are no spoilers.
Don't.
Hey now,
I
Edie
wonder
Darling.
what Jeff's rating's gonna be. Wow.
This is a look into the failing aristocracy of the 70s and how they
Insightful.
it is very unsightly living in a house that is
She said insightful, and you said unsightly. I love it.
Honestly,
That just
both.
both.
I mean both.
Yep, good.
Yeah, the house is falling apart. They're hoarders, but it's a look into a family. And I think what I enjoyed most about it is it's the relationship between a mother and daughter, which can be very toxic. It can be very codependent. And both of them blame each other for their problems, which is what I enjoyed the most about this doc.
It's an interesting thing to enjoy,
It hit
but
a little too close for home for
Yep,
Katy, so
I
she just
think
needed
it
to
was
see
just,
it worse than what she has.
A little personal.
yeah, let's talk about why we chose. Molly, thanks for this. I
You're
really
so welcome.
appreciate you giving me this piece of treasure
I
to watch.
I'm so glad that you seemed like you thoroughly enjoyed it.
I really
Jeff. I
did.
chose this because I thought Jeff would like it. I don't know. I just chose it because I knew it had something vaguely to do with Jackie Kennedy, and I've always thought the Kennedys were really interesting because of their daughter, Rosemary, and all of that. And if you haven't heard about that, you should look it up because it's crazy.
It is crazy.
And I just kind of decided that would be fun and interesting. I had no idea that it was going to give us zero context. I had no idea the style of filming, and I was surprised, to say the least. And I am satisfied with my choice just because it's annoyed everyone. And that's kind of
fair
funny to
enough.
me.
Fair enough. Bryce, thoughts before you started watching this? What were you expecting?
Well, okay, so before I started watching this, I was like, this is going to be a fun one. It's these, mother and daughter, old ladies living in this house together, and they have interesting people coming over, and we'll see what that's about.
How did you end up feeling about it?
The whole time I could not decide whether I hated it, like absolutely loathed it.
Yep.
Or I kind of liked it.
Right.
So that was literally my thoughts too. I was going back and forth between this is the worst thing I've ever watched, but it's not unentertaining. That's kind of the piece that was weird because I wanted to watch a documentary, which when I think of documentary, I think of
Explanations.
some explanation, information, even if it's just a look into someone's life, which this clearly was that. Some context. Who are these people? If we didn't do any background research,
Right.
we wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah,
to
why
go
are we
through
supposed to care about these people?
Exactly.
Did the people in the 70s in the original just know?
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
That's
what I wanna
a
know.
good question.
If it was all over their headlines, they probably did.
Yep. Did it surprise you anyway, y'all? Open question here. Did it surprise you in any way, or were your predictions before you started watching pretty spot on?
I had predictions of it making me learn something, so that was surprising. And
That
it
you
was
didn't?
Yes, it was surprising that I didn't learn, and it was also surprising that it was just them like living. Like there was no
Beginning, middle, or end.
no, it was just
You just
snippets of
there.
their life, but they weren't even like in a certain like or like it was just
All the clips
God.
were together. At one point, I saw an outfit I recognized, and I was like, did this clip come from earlier? But we could not tell.
No.
Yep.
And I
And
think
it's just
some
them
things were-
arguing for
Right.
like an entire scene.
Yep.
And,
Just like last week, we're going to spend a little less time talking about the, synopsis of this because honestly, it would have been really difficult for me to try to give a play-by-play on what the world was happening in this. So I'm going to give a real quick and dirty what Wikipedia said about this doc. Grey Gardens is a 1975 American documentary depicting the everyday lives of two reclusive upper-class women, a mother and daughter, both named Edith Beale, who lived in poverty at Grey Gardens, a derelict mansion at 3 West End Road in the wealthy Georgia Pond neighborhood of East Hampton, New York. And that's all they said because that's all anyone knows about this thing. So Little Edie was my favorite part of this documentary. She was to me a person stuck back in time, even in 1975. So there's something endearing about the way that she behaves. Something very childlike. She's in her 50s in 1975. So there was something very childlike about the way that she behaved, the way that she treated her mother, the way that she enjoyed clearly annoying her mother. There was one scene that stood out where they were in the kitchen and little Edie was just singing this song that her mother hated. And she kept singing it and kept singing it. Now, everything her mom was asking her for, she was still doing. She was still bending to all of her mother's requests. Like, oh, Edie. But she was asking her, telling her the entire time, stop singing that song. You're singing it wrong. You're singing, but she just kept singing it. I'm going, man, that if that's not a way a young teenager or a early or like a middle school aged
Very
kid is going to do,
Yeah.
like,
She's
I don't know what is.
unapologetically herself.
Yeah, yeah. So she was definitely, the standout for me in this. Big Edie, she was interesting in her own right. She was kind of the talent. But yeah, Molly, what was stand out to you about Grey Gardens?
What stood out to me was that she was singing and dancing the entire time and
Yeah.
did not care what anyone thought of her. She was doing that in front of cameras. She was doing that in front of the help for the house, the neighbors, the mom after like countless criticisms and everything. Right. I love how much she loves showing off and whatever, just because it was so fun. It was like almost like a comedic relief aspect of it, where it's just like you can rely on her being that way and dancing and singing and jumping around and walking silly and like just being goofy.
Right.
Even if she's living, I mean, they're living in squalor and like the mom kind of acts like that she knows things are going wrong, but little Edie's up in the attic feeding the raccoons and dancing around.
Yeah.
Like, it's awesome. So I liked that part of it just because it kind of lightened up the fact that the person watching now knows how horrible the conditions that they were living in.
Because the camera doesn't really focus on it.
The camera doesn't focus on it. They don't talk about the conditions that they're living in. We just see it as it's in passing.
Yeah.
And little Edie just has such a spirit about her still. Like, they just don't care.
Right.
I love that.
Brice, talk about some of that squalor that Molly was talking about. Tell us some of the things you really liked about Grey Gardens, the house, the property, I should say.
Well, the whole thing opens up with them talking about a raccoon putting a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
In their brand new wall.
Can't
She even
believe
said
it.
that was the new wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're like, we can't believe it. And then they're like, yeah, there's 8 raccoons just in the basement, like stuff like that. I'm like, what?
The house is full of raccoons and cats,
and fleas. Let's not forget
fleas.
that.
The fleas.
And
The fleas.
Lots of fleas.
Yep.
And everything's just kind of running wild. And there's just, there's cat shit everywhere.
Okay, so just a little bit of a backup, and we can get into it. There's little to no context in this entire documentary. So any information we have about these 2 women and the backstory and some of the details, this was all looked up after the fact or before the fact. You don't get any of this from the documentary, which maybe if the point was to make you go research these 2,
They did a great job.
They did a great job because
Yeah,
it
they
does
did.
make you curious about who the hell they are. But something tells me that wasn't really the point. Anyway, what I was going to say about Brice's comment, I read that Big Edie didn't believe in or didn't like cat litter. She preferred just using like towels.
Is that why she congratulated that cat for
peeing
behind her own portrait?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So newspapers and trash and things like that. She preferred that way.
Yeah. I read that the producers or the cameramen, the Maisels brothers, wore flea collars while they were in the house during the full filming because it took 6 weeks to film just intermittently, and they wore flea collars on their necks and wrists because it was so infested that they couldn't
That's just
work in the conditions. Yeah.
Katy, you mentioned, I think you mentioned early on about the way this was filmed. So to me, this felt like a home video. This is like someone who just got a video camera and
They're just testing it out.
yeah,
basically.
they're just wanting to, they're just the stuff. It felt like the stuff that nobody cares about is being filmed and then goes off to be an award-winning documentary. I don't get it. What did you love about this? You came in here dressed as Little Edie and with the accent.
Beautiful singing too.
And the
very
wonderful
accurate
singing.
singing
I
too.
actually think that was really good.
It was actually better than in
What did you love about
in the
this?
movie.
I don't know. Like when I was watching it at home, like the rest of you, I thought, what the hell is going on? But then when we started talking about it, I kind of fell in love with Little Edie.
Yeah.
I first heard about it when I was watching RuPaul's Drag Race. Shout out to one of my favorite queens, Jinx Monsoon, doing Little Edie for Snatch Game. She's infamous now for this character. And now watching Little Edie, I feel like I know her. And watching her character develop in this documentary, I feel like she was secluded from people. She came here out of duty to her mother, and constantly her mother is telling her, I didn't ask her to do this. I didn't ask her to do this. And then at one point, we see Edie try and decorate her room. Constantly, she is berated by her mother. Bring me this, bring me this. She's just trying to put up a bird cage. She can't finish that because her mom is still calling for her. She can't have her own life. But then when we do get to see her, she's dancing, she's singing, and she's not listening to a single person. It's like they don't even exist. She's just talking about herself. She's like, did I tell you about the time that Paul Getty proposed to me? Just going on and on about who she used to be, who she was. And then eventually we find out she's wearing these scarves because she had alopecia as she got older from the stress of taking care of her mother. And we start to see that her mother was controlling, verbally abusive, not things that we would have said in the 70s, but we start to see how her mother has affected her life. And that's personal for me.
Yeah.
Well, and her mother was the one that didn't let her get married and like move away and everything. So it was
there was the control. So when I was watching this, one of the things that, you know, again, everything that we know about these two is speculation for the most part, if we're just watching the documentary. Anything else is based on research, you know, things like that. But one of the things that kind of went through my head was they both kind of, so we know they blame each other for everything.
Right.
But there's part of me that wonders, did Little Edie move back home because her mother needed it? Or did she move back home because she needed to be taken care of?
Right.
I mentioned that kind of childlike energy about her, and
maybe she couldn't function.
There was a piece of me that during the whole thing going, well, why don't you just leave?
She kept saying she wanted to go to New York.
She wanted to leave. She didn't
want to have another winter in East Hampton.
And you're a 50-year-old woman. You can go do that. No one's going to stop. I mean, besides your mother, who could try to. So I wonder how much of that, I mean, that's classic textbook codependency.
Absolutely.
You know? How much of mental illness would we say plays into this? I mean, it was 1975. There wasn't a lot of mental illness discussed outside of homosexuality being considered mental illness and hysteria being enough that you could put a woman in an institution and just lock her up tied to the floor. So if her mother is unable to take care of herself, as we can see in this film, that she's living in a bed that is crusty and dirty, then can Little Edie not be able to function without having her domineering mother? Maybe she's not really been capable without.
There's a dependency there for sure. You know, to me, just on an pure entertainment side, the bickering is what got to me the most. And I think mostly it was because it felt very, and the reason it put my stomach in knots, what I mentioned earlier, is I think it was because it felt so, let me think. They would go from complimenting each other to dissing on each other in the same sentence, to where her mother would say, you have such a beautiful voice. And then she'd say, oh, you should have never sang that. You didn't sing it right. You're not, you know, like, wow. To not ever know if you were going to be complimented or insulted would be difficult, I think.
Then what about her father? I still don't understand
Neither.
what happened. She said it wasn't a real divorce, but he went to Mexico and got a new wife.
Right.
Brice.
It wasn't recognized by the Catholic Church, so it wasn't a real divorce.
And then can we talk about how
interesting
the church was built on, like, they left the Catholic Church because of divorce?
James is snoring from the couch.
Is that serious what that was?
Yeah, that was
He's knocked out his mouth
mouth's
hanging open.
Oh, get something in there, please.
Oh,
Nope, missed.
nothing.
One more. He's throwing Snickers. Jeff is throwing Snickers, trying to get in James' mouth. Missed again.
What was the last?
One more.
They say the third one's.
Oh, he's awake now. His eye opened, and he opened his mouth to try to catch
And
the
James
Snickers.
awake.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, dude.
No,
I was like, what is that growling noise? James
As soon as I heard it, I was like, that is way too close to
I'm not going to lie, Molly, I thought it was you.
just over here like Katy's just talking and I'm just growling into the microphone.
I just thought it was interesting that we don't really get a good idea of the relationship with the father, because it sounds like Big Edie is talking about how, well, I asked him to come home, but Little Edie would never want him to come home. And then she talks about her dad when she goes to visit him at work, and he says, take that lipstick off, take those heels off. How dare you? It was so confusing.
Very confusing. And all of the different, like, going, the men, where she said, I could have married this boy, or I could have married this boy, and things
Right.
would have been different, and and they you never could have married this guy, and this, that, and the other. Like, man, it was very confusing to try to keep track of who was who and who each person was, who each character was, and what they were to these women.
I want to add real quick.
Please do.
Little Edie talks about being proposed to how many times? Like
Right.
3 times.
3 times, yeah.
Was that a common occurrence in the 40s and 50s?
It must be. Well, you got to court people.
Yes, that's just
You
I'm
gotta go
just
through
blown
that.
away.
Yeah.
Bryce,
But-
didn't you say that you watched the making of it behind the scenes or whatever?
Yeah, I watched That Summer, which is another documentary on this documentary.
I love that. Was that one more informative? Did you learn more?
It was more informative because it showed more people around.
Oh, okay.
Like them putting in a water heater in the house and them
Oh.
talking about how the fire department came in one night and hosed down the entire first floor.
What?
Yeah.
So the context is in the other documentary that
Right.
we did not watch.
So some of the background research that I was doing, it did say that in 1972 the house was raided, which is what Big Edie called it, by the Suffolk County Health Department due to the poor living conditions, and the women faced eviction and the potential razing of their house. Jackie Kennedy Onassis helped
Paid for it to get
provide
clean,
the funds
right?
to
Yeah.
repair and stabilize it. But that was before this documentary was
Right.
made. So what we're seeing
Is
in the
the
documentary
after?
is the after effects
Oh.
of it being brought up
So I
to
bet
village standards.
Can you
Cousin Jackie's
imagine?
pretty pissed. They let it fall into dilapidated
I need
Bad.
to know what it looked like before. I
Right.
need to know. Oh my God.
1972. Yeah.
So Grey Gardens, again, just a little fact. Grey Gardens, the house, was designed in 1897 by Joseph Greenleaf Thorpe and purchased in 1929 by Big Edie and her husband, Phelan Beale. Phelan. After Phelan left his wife, Big and Little Edie lived there for 50 years. So again, I didn't think this was necessarily an unentertaining film. It's just not what I would consider to be a good documentary. But how good were Little Edie's outfits?
Oh
Right.
my
Can
God.
you say that there were like pants and sweaters wrapped around her head and her legs? Because it looks like there's a sweater wrapped
I
around her
would wear
legs.
some of the outfits that she
Absolutely.
wore right now.
Yeah.
Like,
So that's why I
That's-
wish
she's
that
talking about like the
Catherine was here,
fishnet
because
stockings.
they.
And I was
Oh,
like, oh my
yes.
God.
Yes.
So that was the one. So a good piece of fashion advice, and I believe I text this to Molly, was always wear pants under your skirt,
This is
because
true.
if you need to, you can always take off the skirt and use it as a cape.
This is true. I was
Bryce,
very
If
confused.
you ever need a
What
cape,
excellent-
Make
all
sure
the
you
time,
wear
take
your
off
skirt.
your skirt,
Yep.
and you can just do that.
I got that text
That
from
would be
Jeff
so handy.
before I even watched the documentary. I was like, "Oh, I'm starting it now," and he said, "Okay, well, here's that little tidbit of
Very
information." And I
important.
was like, "What the actual hell are we watching?" I was like, "What is this? I chose this. What do you mean? What is this?"
Very important advice.
Bryce,
Mhm.
talk about the marble fawn, Mr. Jerry Torrey.
Oh, yeah. So in the documentaries, we meet this young man named Jerry, and he seems to be a painter or something.
Would you
handyman?
estimate his age for us?
I would say 16.
At most.
I did,
At-
in fact, Google it, and he is, in fact, 16
Is that real?
in it. Yeah, he's 16 in
In
it.
this film? Ugh.
I know.
I
It
thought
makes
he was
it 10
20.
times grosser.
The way he was laying on the bed during the
Yep.
one scene
Right.
and kind of staring at Big Edie, like,
Yes.
Yep.
dude, Them
And
things is
Little
hanging to
Edie
her
talking
knees. You
about-
don't want any of that.
Yep.
what he wants. Like he knows that she knows. She said that she knew he was just in the house for one
Anyway,
thing.
Brice.
They only want one thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Gross.
And then she was like, tell him he's not going to get it and he'll leave us alone.
Yeah, right.
She was.
You got
Little
40
Edie-
years on him. Chill.
Little Edie was very anti Jerry.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was very thinking that he was going to come in there, and he probably is the one who moved her book into the attic.
Oh
don't
my
you think?
God.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he probably came in there and did that because
Right.
that makes a whole
Yeah,
lot of
because
sense.
that's what he has
She
to
was
do.
so
during the day.
convinced that someone, when she's up there with the camera guy, who moved my little book into the attic.
I honestly,
Meanwhile, she's
looking around.
dumping like birdseed onto the ground.
I
for the
honestly
raccoons
thought
to
it was
eat.
raccoons.
And one
Yeah.
thread,
That
just
moved the
all
book.
over the place. I know who took my book up into the attic.
So why were there so many raccoons there? Brice?
Well, so a lot of their ground was very overgrown. So just trees that were planted in a Japanese garden and stuff like that was just overgrown. They can't use their fireplace because trees grew into the chimney.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
That
So
might have been research that he did.
Oh,
it might have been that other
The
documentary,
other documentary.
that really
I need to watch that. Apparently,
told me a lot. But apparently the garbage man, the trash truck, wouldn't come to their house because it was too overgrown. And so then
Couldn't see
they
down from the balcony.
then they started hoarding things more and more.
Oh my goodness.
But raccoons love a good house that they can get into, and this one had lots of holes that just
Not
allowed
to
them.
mention,
active feedings.
yes,
Dinner. They had dinner ready
They
and
had
waiting.
dinner, an entire loaf of bread.
Yeah,
and a
those
whole
raccoons
box
looked
of cat
well
food.
fed.
Yeah,
They were chunky and they were cute and they were well fed.
in some ways, being probably cared for better than these women were.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
and
that
so-
was fresh food.
Did we ever figure out why Jerry was called the Marble Fawn? Did they
Brice.
say Brice?
It
Bruce?
was
Hit
from
me.
a book,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
It was okay. So
He's, like, ready.
I can't remember what I told Jeff
Perfect.
the other day when I Googled it, but it was a romance novel
Oh.
written around Civil War era.
No.
Yeah, it was a. Who wrote that?
It was a famous author, wasn't it?
Yep. Was it T.S. Eliot?
Maybe. Google is about to tell me if you want to
something
keep going.
Maxwell or Nathaniel something.
Nathaniel Hawthorne.
It is,
Yeah.
it is in
Yeah.
fact Nathaniel
Yeah,
Hawthorne.
thank you.
Yep.
Well done.
Yeah.
All right, so we watched this
Beautiful.
a beautiful.
This Criterion collection.
Criterion Collection. There we go.
Unique
What
Unique
was
doc.
what was our feelings after watching it or during watching it?
confusion.
Yeah, literally the first thing on my list is
Mystified.
confusion. Katie, talk about feelings. Let's get into our feelings about this.
Sure. I want to say out loud, in case my mother ever hears this, I love you, and I'm not drawing conclusions about you. But I did have an interesting relationship with my mother, and she was a helicopter controlling parent. I love you, Mom. And so watching this relationship with her was difficult. Seeing someone who is telling someone to do all the time and knowing that your entire identity is based on what someone else tells you
Yeah.
is very difficult. So watching little Edie try and find herself with outfits made from other things, I really identify with that. I understand the need to want to take care of the person who controls you.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of mixed feelings, but I enjoyed her antics. I enjoyed the fact that most of the time, I don't even feel like she was listening to herself talk. She had those
Agreed.
binoculars around her neck, and she's like, I see you down there in the trees. And she's just watching people come and go. And the only time she was really listening is when she's talking to her mother. She made up this whole dance to some music, and her mother's
Yep.
like, you're not a dancer. And she just does whatever she wants. Like, she's trying to live her best life in this terrible situation. I think the two of them live in their own world in Grey Gardens. And I think that's where the magic of the documentary is.
It was interesting to me too how reclusive they really are. I mean, that
The
was
groceries got
they,
delivered.
They barely left.
Mhm.
We saw one scene where she went to the beach. Other than that, I don't think we saw them leave.
That's true. I forgot she went to the beach.
Yeah, which I was like, wow,
You left the house.
probably the cleanest you've ever been
Yeah.
in the going into the
Got all
salt
the
water.
fleas off.
Yeah, for
All the fleas.
Feelings, Molly?
Feelings. Yeah.
besides confusion?
I mean, that's definitely one of the main ones. I also had a similar relationship with my mother growing up. So I also left feeling very strange, where I was like, it was hard to watch. It almost felt like they were ignorant of the fact that it was so bad between them and
I'm
in
sure
the
they
house.
probably were.
And they probably were, or they would have hopefully taken steps to get out of it, or mental illness plays a strong part in that and everything. So
We didn't touch on that.
yeah, it was really hard to watch someone that is actively struggling through mental health that doesn't know and can't help themselves.
It'd be interesting to sit with like a couple like licensed therapists or psychologists or whatever and watch this and just see if they had what their input
What
is.
their take.
Yeah.
Let's
Anyway,
get the
continue.
diagnoses up in here. Diagnoses? Diagnoses.
Gnosize.
Gnosize? Diagnoses?
Dianarcissistic.
Any
Yeah,
other
that's the one.
comparisons?
Yeah, I don't know. So it was hard to watch it
Yeah.
with like obvious. It's hard to call it suffering because they don't care about it. But I honestly, it just made me want to research it truthfully, just because I cannot believe that those people were connected at all to
Yeah.
the presidency.
Yeah.
We like
high class society.
high class society, like Jackie Kennedy stepping in and getting their house cleaned for them, and then what was that like
3 years
when
later, it
you
was
were
just
in
right.
1975 and those were in the headlines, and all of a sudden like poof, like this huge thing is happening. So I don't know.
Brice,
Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
this credits roll and you're thinking what?
I'm thinking, wow, cannot wait for a sequel.
That's it? That's all I get?
I just watching it, it was I couldn't turn it off. You know,
Right.
I couldn't just stop and walk away. You just had to sit there and see what happened. And it starts out like just any normal day for these ladies. But then the more it progresses, you start to notice more and more things around the house that are going wrong. And then you see just how they're living beyond that. It's a crazy ride.
Yeah.
It almost makes you want to help them.
There was a
Floor's
piece
so
of that.
dirty.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to pick up the trash and get them a new mattress.
It's like,
Right.
Also, the 13-room house that they share a room, 2 twin beds in, because the rest of it's so dilapidated that
So do we know that that's where Little Edie slept?
we don't know, but I'm pretty sure, right?
Because didn't she have another room where she was
The room
decorating the
was
walls?
decorating.
You're right.
I don't remember the bed in that room though.
Me neither.
Yeah, I didn't either.
She was cleaning out her brother's older rooms too.
Yeah,
So
she said the dresser had stuff of his, and that's when
yeah,
Baby
she
started
could
screaming.
never
Yeah.
clean out the drawers.
I need to know more about
Can't
these
throw that away.
brothers
She
as
had-
well.
She had like a fine-tuned ear for her mother's voice too, because I had to turn it up pretty loud to try to get the information, because it was 1975 mixing. It wasn't probably the best
Nope.
audio, but she could hear it. She'd be like, "Oh, mother's calling. Someone's in the house."
Mother Darling had
Yeah.
dog tone, like pitch.
Yeah,
that
like
was
a dog
way
whistle,
up there.
yeah. You,
Edie, is that you?
I couldn't help but feel sad during this. So the
No.
first, admittedly, the first, half hour of this movie was the hardest for me, because there was no context. Throughout it, you can start building some of your own context based on what they're saying to each other about their relationships and the things that, the heartbreaking piece was knowing the dreams that little Edie had, that whether they were her mom's fault or not doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
It was more that she felt there was all these different relationships that I could have had. There was all these different
that could have
opportunities.
happened.
Yeah. She was talking about getting auditions and how she was going to get this and she was going to have this and she was going to do this. But, but her mother's literally, I just saw it come on the screen in the background here, where her mom said, "No, you were not. You were not about to have that." Now, was it true? Was her mom truly saying, "You never had those opportunities. You're making that up"?
Right.
Who knows? We don't know that. But we know that little Edie believes that they were there. So sadness was besides confusion, sadness was my feeling. Was this a well-made documentary in your opinion?
1975 is hard to classify as well-made.
I want to look up every other doc that came out in 1975 and just compare it and go, is this just how they were made?
Truthfully, I don't think that they put a lot of effort in because they didn't need to, because the style of doc that they were going for was just
showing up,
filming them. Like there was probably one long continuous 10-minute take of them just arguing.
Growing up, if you had told me when I was a teenager or younger that, Jeff, you're going to do a podcast someday where you watch documentaries, I would have gone, like hell I am, because they're the most boring things in the world. This is what people think of when they think of documentaries. It's just kind of a boring, like it's just what you watch in nature class in school, and you're
I love
falling
nature
asleep
documentaries
because they're easy to sleep to. But because now they're made in a way that's cinematic.
It's supposed to be exciting because that's how they get more viewers.
Right.
So was this like the beginning of that, where it was just straight filming, no interaction,
no storytelling,
they literally
no
had a
voiceover.
cameraman in the mirror, like you could see him in the mirror.
That's why I said
see the cords coming down from the stairs. I think that's something that I enjoyed, though, was seeing that they had no power in the house, and so we could see the lights in the bedroom that were hooked up with these big power, and then the lines through the house.
Yeah.
And then once in a while they would pull the camera back and look slowly at the mattress, almost as they're trying not to make them feel ashamed of their living conditions. They're just trying to showcase the fact that while they're having this discussion about whether or not Little Edie could sing, this mattress has so many stains it should be thrown outside, but they're definitely not aware of it.
You're building some of your own context based on what you're seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was almost nice that they didn't focus on the squalor that they were in, and they weren't trying to shame them.
This wasn't an
into
episode
it.
of Hoarders.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do love that show too.
That's an interesting show, and
it makes me queasy.
Yeah,
honestly,
for sure. I agree that there is something kind of endearing about letting the women tell their own story. And building that context. I think that if, don't take this the wrong way, Al and Dave or whatever your names were, but I think if the right filmmakers took a project where they were able to tell a story by letting the characters in the story tell it without doing a voiceover, without the subtitles, without the,
it could be really cool.
Could be really cool way to do it, because agreed, they didn't focus on some of the things, but I don't think they really focused much on anything.
That's
they definitely
true.
didn't ask questions.
No.
And maybe that's part of it. Like, we don't know the purpose of this at all, except that they showed up and said, will you show us your house?
Right. Let us sit in this room.
Let us just be a part of your life for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah. I can't say overall that this was the type of or style of filmmaking that I enjoy, besides the fact that I always like kind of the unpolished feel of things.
Makes you feel more authentic.
It was definitely unpolished. That is for sure. A little bit of context, I guess, about the main characters. So we have two main characters here. They're the Edies. Edith Ewing Bouvier Beale, Big Edie. She died in 1977. So that was 2 years after this came out.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, so she didn't last much longer than this. She died of pneumonia, which isn't super
Something that probably
surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reported that as Big Edie neared her death, Little Edie asked if she had any final thoughts, and Big Edie's reply was, "There's nothing more to say. It's all in the film."
Oh.
Speaking about this one. It breaks my heart to think that somebody's full story is wrapped up in something like this. But, this, like Katy mentioned earlier, these people were probably more well known. Maybe that was something that, in 1977 was, maybe this was a more compelling story. If this had been, who's popular in our culture right now?
The Kardashians.
Yeah. If this was the Kardashians, would this have hit differently? Not for me, because I don't follow them as much, but for our society as a whole. Yeah. Would it have been more compelling? Maybe. And maybe you wouldn't have had to. If a Kardashians documentary came out right now and was made the exact same way, we would have looked at it a little differently. Little Edie, Edith Bouvier Beale, following her mother's death, she attempted to start a cabaret career at age 60.
Iconic, truly.
Yeah, she tried. 8 shows is what the kind of
Show
career
to.
amounted to. She was at a New York nightclub.
It's honestly
She
The
got to New
show-
York.
not
Yeah.
bad. 8
So- but-
shows.
The show got really bad reviews.
Oh.
But the funny thing was, is the club actually kept those reviews from her. One of New York Times reviews said, it called it a quote, public display of ineptitude.
Oh.
But again, the club kept those from Little Edie's ears, hopefully
that's
keeping
good.
her
Yeah.
amped up until they had to close the show.
Yeah.
She lived in Grey Gardens for 2 years after her mother's death, all by herself, which kind of breaks my heart. And eventually she sold it for $220,000, which in today's world is about $821,000.
She got taken for a ride.
Yeah. But in the shape that thing was in,
That's
I'm
true.
surprised she got that much out of it.
Yeah.
She then moved to Florida in 1997 and died in her apartment in 2002 of a suspected stroke or heart attack at the age of 84. So neither of the
That's
Edies are with us anymore.
Long lives, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there a message here, Brice, in this? Were they trying to convey any kind of a message?
I don't think they were trying to convey one. I think the message is that you should help your neighbors, especially if their lawn is overgrown to the point where the trash truck can't come visit them.
That's what you took out of this.
That's what I took from it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And also,
maybe.
Those are
raccoons
wise
are
words.
great house pets.
Absolutely.
I
Look at their little
completely
hands.
agree.
They
can
have-
grab
they
so
have
many
5
things.
fingers.
Yeah. I want to pet one.
Me too.
They look so cute.
I want to name it a trash panda.
Yes.
Do you, Molly, do you think that there was a message? Was there a heartbeat to this?
I don't think that they intended one, truthfully.
Why did they make it?
I
what was the
honestly
point?
don't know.
Mhm.
I could not tell you.
There was a lot of confusion in my
There was-
mind as well.
Yep, there was a lot of confusion. The message that they got across was these ladies are a little kooky,
Mhm.
and this is a really fun thing to watch.
So
People
my
just vibing.
my fear, and maybe Katy, you can speak to this. My fear, and I know that there were some reviews that came out regarding this documentary, was that this was more of an exposition piece. That this was a freak show. That the filmmakers made this in hopes of, almost sideshow kind of deal. Like, look at these high class people who are down in the dumps, and look how crazy they are, and look how bad it is for them. And do you feel that there's any truth to that? Is there any?
Having done no outside research, looking at it now and thinking about the time it was of 1975, JFK was dead. Jackie Kennedy is on her own. I think maybe people were saying, let's kind of find the side celebrities. We didn't have reality TV, so let's find who's related to celebrities. And maybe there was some gossip about, Jackie's cousin lives in East Hampton, and I heard their mansion's pretty falling apart. And somebody else said, well, let's go take a look. Do you think they'd let us in? And I think that's maybe how this started, because I can't think of another reason why they would have made this. They didn't do it out of the kindness of their heart, I don't think at all. I think it started with, hey, we heard that Jackie Kennedy's cousin's a little nuts, and she tried to fix at the house. Let's go see how it's doing. Then they got there, and they're like, this is going to be something. And this is what they got. And I think the only reason it didn't become a sideshow and won awards is because the directors and the filmers came around and saw that these are two good people trying to survive in a condition that they can't help themselves out of. But my concern is, having not done the research, when it came out and it started to win awards, did they have permission from Big Edie and Little Edie to do this? Did they see it beforehand?
Right.
Did they get the awards with the respect from these two women? And if Big Edie died in 1977, was she proud of the film? And from what
Sounds like maybe.
it sounds like
Yeah.
maybe she was, and I hope so. So even if it started under false pretenses, it sounds like maybe it was okay in the end.
Yeah, I think there was a story to be told here. I think it was one, unfortunately, I kind of feel like they missed the opportunity to tell a compelling and probably heartwarming story. Or even if it was just, doesn't have to be heartwarming, just a compelling story.
Right.
But I don't think it was told very well. Again, if I didn't have the internet and was able to look up anything, none of that story got told. All we got was speculation based on the bickering of two people. And yeah, there's some endearing things about both of them, but overall, I didn't get much out of it.
They're strangers to us.
I'm hoping that
Right.
it's less of an expose, like sideshow, freak show kind of thing, just simply because they didn't show a lot of the like house and how
Yeah,
they do
didn't focus
live.
on that.
Like if they would have shown more in depth of that, I would have definitely thought this is basically a documentary length of the episode of Hoarders.
Yeah.
But since they didn't focus on that, I do think that they, at least hopefully,
They didn't even ask them.
Want-
They didn't say,
yeah.
do you want a new mattress? Do you see
right.
what's falling apart?
Right.
Why are you eating cat food?
It gives me a little bit more faith that this just was simply, these are two interesting people,
Mhm.
and this is.
Did I
listen to
miss them eating cat food?
It was liver pate, but
That
it was
they
out
were
of the-
eating?
Yeah, so it was out of a little can that was like
She's like, I can't read the label
Put
anymore.
lemon on it.
put lemon on it,
Oh,
and it was a
that's
liver
right.
pate. But they never specifically said if it was a cat food can or if it was a can of
She said the label was too faded. She couldn't read it.
that she couldn't read it.
Well, and then she's like, don't eat that because I don't want you to get fat.
And then just put lemon on it.
Yeah.
and
She's
yeah,
like, that's for the cats. I know you want to eat it. Don't eat it.
yeah. So,
Interesting.
like, yes, they ate cat food, but like, no, because they didn't know. I mean,
It came
wasn't
out of a can.
labeled.
Yeah.
It wasn't intended for cats. They just fed it to the cats.
So normally I ask, do we feel that there was any stones left unturned?
I
Any
think
questions left unanswered?
all of them.
Yeah, there's not a question that was answered.
There's
in
so
this,
many
at
stones
least
that
very
got
few.
turned. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't know who they were, who they are, how they're doing, what they were doing, what they're dealing with. We literally had nothing, which doesn't bode well for me in the ratings game, which is the part of the show that we're at right now. All right. So our crew here in-house is going to give Grey Gardens an official documentary rating. Each crew member scores the documentary on a scale of 1 to 10 items, with 1 being the absolute piece of garbage and 10 being on par with the best documentaries they've ever seen in their life. The item changes each week based on the documentary, and collectively we have chosen to say what, Molly? To call our item of ratings what?
Flea collars.
Flea collars.
Out of 10, flea collars.
Out of 10 flea collars. So let's
Maisels are
start.
wearing 6 just themselves, so it's whatever.
They were wearing 6?
Well, 3 each. It's 2
Is
of
that
them.
3?
Yeah,
each?
one around
Both
their neck
wrists
and
and
both
neck.
wrists.
Did I miss that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well.
It's okay, I
sorry.
forgive
Welcome
you.
to the show, Jeff.
Yep.
All right. So, Molly, let's start with you. How many flea collars does Grey Gardens get?
You know, I don't feel bad bringing this documentary to you guys because it was an interesting and fun watch and fun to talk about. But I will not recommend it to anybody else, probably, and I will not be rewatching it.
You want
I'm
to
so
watch
sorry.
something that makes you feel weird?
Right. I'm gonna be like, do you want to see something crazy? Yeah, 3 flea collars out of 10.
3 flea collars from
Yes.
Molly. Our own little Edie, Katy.
Yes,
She's
Jeff,
wrapping
mother
the scarf.
darling. I think I have to give this 6 flea collars. I know I have
Yeah.
to change mine out every day, but I do think I'll rewatch this one because I learn something new from Little Edie's outfits every time. She's such a fashion icon.
You're gonna take inspiration from her now.
I like that.
Mhm.
Bruce.
Oh man, you know, they say a good piece of art makes you feel something, and it leaves you to make your own conclusions.
What'd you conclude, Bruce?
I would conclude that this was a frustrating watch, and that I loved every second of it.
Oh, great.
So I'm gonna go with 6 flea collars.
I thought for
6
sure
flea
you were going to
collars.
say 10 out of 10.
Nah.
Like, I loved it.
I
This
don't know
is the
that I would
best
believe
one I
him
ever
if he said
watched. I know
that.
we'd be like, do you want to
Just-
you want to retake that?
Just because once I was done watching it, that only made me look into it more.
That's true. You did watch you did extra homework.
Yeah, you did. You
I'm-
watched a second documentary about
Remember
it.
for class action project? You were
and-
like, I never
And
I'm
assign.
gonna be so happy.
I am going to watch the Drew Barrymore one at some point because nothing is answered, and I still need those answers. Even though I have to draw my own conclusions,
so right.
I'm going to be the most informed I can be.
And I'll be Little Edie. It'll be great.
So
Extra homework for Bruce.
for me, for Jeff,
Yes, Jeff.
I gave it a 2.
Okay.
2 flea collars because I really didn't enjoy
I feel
this.
better about my 3 now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think from the
Jeff.
beginning you let us know that you were very
Yeah.
upset.
Yes.
I'm not gonna it again. Just like a 10, it's gonna be really hard for me to give something a 1
But a 2.
because it could be worse. I didn't turn it off. I
Right. You
continued,
also
I
couldn't,
continued watching it. Yeah, I kind
You
of had to
had
for
to
this.
finish it.
I did find some some redeeming factors
Right.
with some of the characters just being interesting people, but I don't think that had anything to do with the documentary itself. That's why I gave it a 2.
I see.
So with a 3, a 6, a 6, and a 2, the official documentary rating for Grey Gardens is a whopping 4.25.
Sounds on par.
Yeah. So
4.25.
4.25.
My new goal is to get a documentary and suggest it that Jeff gives it a 1. That's my new goal.
God, don't do that to me. All right, friends, socialites, singers, dancers, and kind of creepy
Members of
maintenance
the
men.
Omnium.
Bryce.
Hey, what up?
Marble Fawns.
I want to thank, the marble fawn himself, Bryce. Thank you all for hanging out. It's been a fun watch. It was an interesting watch. I'll
There you
say
go.
that. It's always fun to hang out with you guys, though. And let's talk about next week. For next week, I get to be the dealer for the documentary, and our documentary will be called Stutz. This is a 96-minute documentary from 2022, directed by actor Jonah Hill. This chronicles the life and career of psychiatrist Dr. Phil Stutz, who happens to be Jonah Hill's therapist.
Like the Jonah Hill?
The Jonah Hill, yeah. So
That's awesome.
should hopefully have some comedy in it, some levity, but also being I have some history in psychology. That was my major in college. So kind of merging comedy and the life of a Hollywood actor and the relationship he has with his therapist just seemed interesting to me. It looked like it was going to be well made. I haven't watched it yet, but it piqued my interest, so that's why I chose it. It can be streamed on Netflix. We're going to lay on the leather couch. We're going to wonder how each and every one of our deep, dark secrets makes us sound a little crazier than we are, one documentary at a time. On behalf of DJ, Katy, Molly, Brice, and the entire Talkumentary family, I'm your host, Jeff Klasky, and I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you keep your minds open and be real kind to each other. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, isn't that
Bye.
wonderful?
See you next time with Mother Darling.
Later, players.
Later, player.